Hi there, everybody. While some students are still trickling in, before we start talking about transfer essays, let's kind of chat a little bit about where are you at in the process. Do you know what school you're going to? Have you even started seeing some of the transfer essay prompts that they've been looking at? No idea. Where are you guys at? Yeah?
I'm transferring to Aurora University, and I have a draft of some of my essays.
Wow, awesome. You're pretty far ahead.
But I don't know that I like them.
Okay. Well, today definitely we're going to be working on improving drafts, and that's going to be towards the later half of the presentation. Yeah.
I don't know what schools I'm transferring to yet, but I'm thinking about it.
Okay, perfect. Then this is going to be a great place to get you started. Once you have picked a school, then you're going to have some knowledge to work with. Awesome. Great. We've got a great range with us here today. So what are we going to be talking about today? Why are we all here? We're going to be talking about transfer essays. As you consider your next steps at CUNY, you're probably going to be transferring to a four-year university beyond this one, whether you know which one it is yet or not. And all of these universities tend to ask for these transfer essays as you're going into their college as part of the admission process. So we're going to talk today about strategies for answering the questions that they have on these transfer essays and, writing a successful one. So the first thing that we want to do, even before starting the essay, is to think about the prompt. This is the most important part. You're going to have one prompt, or you might have multiple prompts, or you might be able to choose from different prompts. Make sure that you read the directions so you know which ones to do and what to do. Then you're going to read each prompt with a pencil in hand if you have it printed out, or you're going to look at it on the computer and be able to highlight things, copy them onto a document so you can identify what are you being asked to write about. You want to break that prompt list down into a list of components and make sure that you answer everything. Are you being asked to write a personal narrative of some kind? Are you being asked to describe some sort of activity or qualification that you have? Are you being asked to describe your educational and career goals? These are not all the same thing. You want to make sure that your writing actually addresses exactly what they're asking you to do. So you want to underline each thing that you're expected to do in your writing. Some prompts also include a word count. If it says 500 words, you're going to want to write exactly 500 words. If the prompt says an essay between 250 and 350 words, you'll need to write an essay between 250 and 350 words. However, your first draft doesn't have to be anything close to that. It can be 100 words, it can be 1,000 words. You know yourself as a writer, most writers find it easier to cut material than to add material, so overwriting can be better. I get attached to my writing and I find it easier to underwrite first and then go back and find things to expand later. So whichever way you write, or just kind of go for it and do whatever you can with that first draft and don't worry about the word count for the first draft. If you already have your prompt, some of you already do, and even have a bit of a draft started, you can use that as guidance and focus throughout this presentation and be thinking about the prompt in mind. However, some of you don't have a prompt yet, and so you can use the University of Illinois in Chicago prompts that you're going to be looking at to try to show you how to break down these prompts. So here's the exact prompt that UIC asks for in the personal statement transfer essay. So the first sentence says, the personal statement is carefully considered for the admission selection process. This means that the essay should probably be a few paragraphs long because it's going to be very important. Let's see what the prompt is asking for. It says, this is the opportunity for you to tell us more about yourself, your readiness for college, and your activities and accomplishments. Explain any personal experience, responsibilities, or challenges that have impacted you or your academic achievements. So you know that you need to talk about each of those things. Pay special attention to these ands or ors. When it says your readiness for college and your activities and accomplishments, you know that you need to talk about everything that it just listed. In the second sentence, it says experience, responsibilities, or challenges. You might have a choice between those items. But you still know, okay, first sentence, I need to write about these things. Second sentence, I need to write about some of this stuff. It can be a little bit vague, that whole So tell us about yourself can be really daunting. Just try to think about what makes you unique, what you really need to talk about for them to get a better idea of who you are. Do you have a background, identity, interest, or talent that your essay wouldn't feel complete without? For example, when I was transferring from COD to North Central, I had just published a book, and that had consumed my life at the time. My essay wouldn't really feel complete without talking about that. So I felt like that was definitely a great thing that I could focus on. What is an accomplishment, event, or realization that sparked a personal growth period for you? Were there any obstacles or setbacks that you overcame or that you learned lessons from? Those are some concepts and questions that also might come up not only in specific university transfer essays, but also in the Common App transfer essays. So Common App, you might be familiar, is kind of something that goes out to and applies to most colleges. Okay. So UIC requires 2 essays. So here's the prompt for the second one. This one is about choice of program. So the first one was really about who are you as a person. This one is more about you as a student. Please provide an essay that explains why you chose your intended program of study. What interests you the most about your major? To which careers or job opportunities do you think acceptance into this program will lead? So it's asking 3 things. You need to make sure that you answer all of the questions. So let's talk about how to do that, how to get these ideas. So again, the most important thing when talking about your transfer essay is to tell your own unique stories through your answers to the prompts. You don't need to write an autobiography, though, that details everything about your life. And this can be one of the hard things that I've noticed with students is they want to include many different events in their life, building up to this revelation about why they want to be, an automotive engineer or a biology major, these sorts of things. And unfortunately, with the page limit or the word limit, often that's not possible to show every single step. You need to choose what are the most important things or what are the things you really want to share. It's about bringing out some details about who you are. Why are you doing this? It's not just some awkward thing. The purpose is to let the committee who's choosing to admit you or not, let them get to know you much better beyond what's in the rest of your materials. So you don't need to explain your GPA and everything. They already got that from the other materials that you've submitted to them. But you are more than your GPA. And this essay is the place to show that. Transfer essays also often go to the department that you're applying to. So this might be a way for your potential future professors to get an early insight about who you are. Like, oh, I would want this student in my classroom, So they tend to have more time to read these essays than the committee for a gigantic community college. And so they're going to pay special attention to it. So you should pay special attention to the writing. That doesn't mean that you need to focus on all the downfalls of your life or tell a traumatic story in the hopes that it's going to make you stand out. Often transfer essay readers, have seen it all pretty much. So standing out for the sake of standing out is kind of a lost cause, and you don't need to dwell on these things just for that purpose. Instead, the point is to try to be honest in introducing yourself and choose something that's meaningful to you. Let's discuss some strategies to find out and express what those things are. We're going to start with personal inventories, which will help you tell that story and find possible ways for you to talk about some things like your life, your goals, and your values. So there are some personal inventory questions on the screen and in your handout. So you want to read through those right now and think about which ones do you think would be helpful in the kind of essays that, maybe that first personal essay from UIC. So take a moment to read and highlight the ones that you like. Now I'd like you to think about the prompts that you chose, kind of get a little bit meta, take a step back, and think about why did you choose this one? Why did you feel like it would be useful? So consider it for a moment, and then think about what you would write to answer this question. After that little bit of thought, now you're going to have a little bit of time to actually begin that writing. So you're not writing your essay yet, just write a few sentences in answer of the question that you felt would be really helpful for you. We're going to take one more minute. You see some of you are giving nice full answers, some of you are kind of already getting into what we're going to be talking about next with brainstorming, so a good variety of approaches with this. About another 15 seconds, we'll wrap it up. So these personal inventory questions are to help you put into words this amorphous idea that you have of yourself as a person. You know who you are, but how would you describe it to somebody else? This kind of helps you with that. But maybe you didn't find it as helpful, but we have more strategies, so don't worry. Let's talk now a little bit about brainstorming. What is brainstorming? How do you do it? So let's talk about this. If you have an essay for class and you're given a prompt, what do you do before the writing? How do you brainstorm? Anyone?
You just like write down all your ideas?
Yeah, write down all your ideas. And do you use full sentences or kind of sentence fragments, just ideas?
Like right now, that's kind of where I'm at. I can't think of sentences to write, but I can just think of like partial ideas. Is that okay?
Exactly. That's what this brainstorming is going to be all about. It's an alternative way if the personal inventory questions weren't working out for you, especially writing them out in complete sentences. Or right now you can use this as a way to expand on what you discovered in your personal inventories. Brainstorming is about just writing down a bullet-pointed list of words, just coming up with lists. So take a look at the inventory topics that you chose as helpful and make a list of associated words or thoughts that personal inventory topic made you think about. For example, I looked at the spare time one and maybe I would write video games, reading, scuba diving, embroidery, just kind of go for it, write random things. We're going to take a few minutes and so look at one of those questions and just start doing that, writing down these word associations. Go. About 15 more seconds. Okay, now we're going to take one more minute. We'll look at one of those items on your list that you just created and expand on that one. For example, let's say I focused on video games. Now I'm going to make a new list that's like, okay, Minecraft, Stardew Valley, Guitar Hero, online gaming, community, cooperation. See where that leads you. All right, we're going to take about a minute to do that. About 15 more seconds. Okay, now talk with the person next to you about some of the things that you wrote and just kind of what you felt that was helpful about this activity. If you feel comfortable, talk to them about parts of your list. So let's see.
So I tried to pick like some of these maybe seem similar. It's like role models who inspired you, so I felt like those are kind of the same, and then a teacher. So I'm trying to come up with my teachers. And so I know for this one was the one we were supposed to write these sentences, but I still just have phrases.
Yeah.
For this, I kind of tried to think of like specific things that we'd done in the class that I had liked.
Yeah.
So it's helping me come up with ideas. But I feel like it's getting me farther away from writing about me. So I have to find a way to bring it back.
Exactly. That would be what you would do in the essay. This is kind of coming up with the content of who this is. Maybe a lot of essay questions are who inspired you to do these sorts of things. That might be something that an essay would ask you to write about. And then at the end you would want to bring it back to yourself and what that inspired you to do and how that happened. But this is a great way then, that's excellent, that you've come up with the whole content of what actually happened. And then it would just take that next step of how. And so this is what it's all about, is coming up with the first basic ideas of what do I say? What is there to this? What happened in my life that I can write about? Okay, so we've talked about the list of inventory questions and we've talked about brainstorming. Let's talk about a third way of coming up with ideas, which is free writing. Free writing is a lot like brainstorming, but instead of a list or random fragments, you will write more longer phrases and then sometimes even full sentences. This is about letting your writing follow your brain wherever it's going. You don't need to worry about getting off track because there is no track. Don't worry about the organization or if things make perfect sense because this is not drafting. This is writing for the sake of discovery, of finding what is in your brain without you being consciously aware of it and just kind of going and following that line. So you can pick something that you mentioned and that you listed in your brainstorming and use this free writing right now to expand on it. All right, we're going to take a few minutes of it, starting now. about 15 more seconds. Okay, does anybody want to share, please share your favorite sentence or phrase that you wrote from this. What did you like about what you wrote?
I don't have anything I like yet.
Okay, what about the least disliked phrase or the first sentence you wrote?
I don't know. I feel like I didn't quite get to discovering what I wanted to say. I'm still on my way there.
Exactly. Student over here says, my favorite phrase was, I really, 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 really like Jimmy John's. I think it encapsulates something about my enthusiasm. I don't know. So yeah, you know, whatever works. Anything goes in free write. It's totally fine. And so yeah, these are just short exercises. You would probably be doing these for a little bit longer, but it's kind of to get you into the practice of doing them here. Okay. Then a fourth way that you might come up with information, if you're more of a visual person, is with mind mapping. We've talked about some ways to generate ideas, and so this might be a way of expanding on one, or a visual way of organizing your thoughts that you've kind of had maybe a little bit all over the place. For example, if a prompt asks you about your teachers have inspired you on your academic path, you might think of something like, okay, my favorite teacher was one for, okay, I took a biology class, I really liked her. We had labs in the class, we had a field trip to the aquarium that I really liked. So speaking of aquariums, it happened during the summer semester for some reason, we had more time. Also in that summer, my best friend and I took some glass jars and caught some pollywogs in them. So it's kind of all over the place, but then you can draw circles around the subjects and see how these things connect, because, okay, wait, these little tadpoles, these frogs relate back to the biology class. Maybe I can identify, I really loved that. Okay, this is where I discovered that I loved animals, so then my favorite teacher, my biology teacher, led me to this discovery of how much I loved animals. You know, having these lines drawn can help you figure out what the associations are between your ideas. And so it's kind of a nice way, maybe after you've done some free writing or brainstorming, or if you want to use this to begin with, to test out where are the connections between your ideas. So why don't you take a list of something that you've written, maybe it was from the brainstorming activity or something like that, and see if you could either physically write it, you have some handouts to write your paper on, or handouts to write on, or even just in your mind, think about how, if at all, your ideas might connect with each other. We'll just take a minute to kind of visualize that. This one's the hardest for me because I never know how to put things on the paper, but a lot of people do find it really helpful. Yeah, so I see you've got a big X here, so we can see how using this can make it clear what things are not related to. That's pretty good. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, give you a few more seconds to wrap up. Okay, now we're going to regroup a little bit. Let's think, take a little bit of an inventory. What strategies do you feel like worked the best for you? Personally, as a writer, and especially as you're writing these transfer essays, what worked the best for you?
I like just the brainstorming, I think.
Yeah, that's definitely my favorite too. Just kind of bullet points listed. Okay, what are my ideas? What do I even begin to think about this without needing to organize them into complete thoughts? It's really great. Okay, excellent. What do you want to remember for future use? For example, when I tried these out, what I wanted to remember was the mind mapping doesn't really work for me, so I can skip that step. What else did you guys discover?
I really like the mind mapping, and I drew pictures instead of words.
Pictures, awesome. So you'll want to remember, hey, these pictures can help me come up with ideas, or it helps me organize my thoughts. Awesome. All right. And then thinking about what do you need to do next after you've done all this brainstorming and generating some ideas? Write the paper. Yep, okay. That's kind of the next step, is we're going to talk about drafting now. We've come up with all these ideas. It's time to start putting them onto, and organizing them onto paper into a draft. So again, when you're asked to write essays in college so far, how do you begin a draft? Where do you start? Has anyone, so I know that one of you has already started drafting your transfer essay, so where did you begin?
Well, I just started with the first sentence, like the opener, but it took me a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked at other essays first, and I kind of tried to copy them, but now I feel like it's not really mine.
Okay, yeah, so some students might benefit from looking at examples, especially in academic classes. If the professor has posted a sample, that can be really helpful, but then that can also be a danger of, does this really feel like mine? And so we want to step away from the samples at some point. Okay, and so really that getting started, that first step, that first sentence can be the hardest part. So the strategy that we're going to talk about today for drafting is to start it like it's a letter. Then you know how to start it. Dear someone, who are you going to be addressing it to? Someone close to you. Someone who cares about you, who knows about you, who wants you to succeed. And so you can tell them, describe to them what your goals are for the future, or for your education, or for your job, the dream of what you have after you leave COD. You can address this to your parents, your best friend, your dog, whoever you feel like you can comfortably talk to. So that way, if you were just talking to them, you wouldn't wonder, oh, how do I start this conversation? You just burst in and start talking. And so that kind of alleviates some of the pressure. That's why it's a good strategy to start with just writing it as a letter. So that's what we're going to start doing, taking just a few minutes, and we're not going to complete the whole thing, but again, this is to kind of get you used to the idea of this is how you can do something, is to start writing a letter. And we're going to use anything promising from pre-writing exercises or just restarting, and I'll have the example prompt up here again to kind of guide what you want to write about. I'm just going to take a few minutes to do that. about another 15 seconds. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what that was like. What was it like to write this? Talk about what was your process or your thoughts about this. Anyone?
At first, I didn't know if it was helping, but then I kind of got on a roll, and then it made me realize like what the connections were between the things I'd brainstormed before. So it helped. It felt kind of like the free writing, but because you had to explain to another person, I think it helped like see the relationship between the ideas.
So this is still taking that next step from just writing for yourself to writing with somebody else in mind, even though it's a trusted person. So that's really great that you found that helpful in making those explanations. Awesome. Okay, so excellent. So then some of you have that started, some of you might have that finished draft in months, some of you already have some drafts going. Let's talk about what happens when you finish that first draft, because first draft is not the final draft. That was one of the hardest lessons I learned in college because I was a first draft, final draft person. But now drafting is done. Now revision is time to make major changes to the draft. It could even be starting it over. You can go all the way back to the brainstorming strategies that we talked about earlier and completely begin with a different idea if you're very dissatisfied with your draft. So, how do you folks revise? What do you think we mean when we talk about revising?
Isn't that just where you like find the mistakes, like spelling and punctuation?
Aha! So that is going to be editing. So that's going to be our next step. So editing and proofreading are not the same thing as revising. Revising is really about getting the shape and the content of the draft to be what you want it to be, which might again mean starting over or moving things around often, or having big chunks of information being changed out or moved around. One thing that you might need to revise for is word count. Again, removing or adding large chunks of text. You might find you have too many words or not enough to meet the requirements. So what are some things that you think we can do to reduce or revise your word count? Think about what you do for those essays or anything, and there are some extra tips for reducing word count on your handout. And then thinking of what you just worked on during drafting, when you're writing a letter, you are writing to somebody who knows you, and so that means you leave out details. If you're writing, hey Mom, remember that time when we had that pool party when I was 7? Well, that's what inspired me to be a marine biologist. Your mom would start to be able to make some of those connections, but to a person who is a stranger to you, with these admission representatives, you would need to describe more about what happened at that pool party. So take a minute to jot down anything that you would need to revise in your draft if you had started with this letter. Just so you have a little bit of a plan moving forward. Okay, then once the draft is kind of the shape and the extent that we want it to be, that's when we go into the editing phase. So how do you folks edit and proofread your papers? What's your strategy?
I give it to my mom.
Okay, that's a great idea, is giving it to another source who's got fresh eyes and can look and see, wait, what did you mean by this when it was clear to you, and then kind of shift some words around. This is those sentence level structure things that we can be talking about. What else? Spell check. Yeah, Grammarly and spell check are really great things that you definitely would want to look at, but not rely completely on. So they can first of all be wrong. Whenever it says conciseness, I basically say ignore it because it's trying to change your voice. And then sometimes it just doesn't understand what you're doing with the sentence. So that's where it comes in, like what Amy said, I gave it to my mom. That's great because that's a human being who kind of actually understands better how sentences work. Another tip might be to read your paper backwards, from the last sentence to the first one. This breaks up your expectations and your flow of your reading so you don't just read through it and kind of go as it's expected. It forces you to pay attention to the individual ideas and words. Alright. Then after you've done all that, after you've revised and you've edited and got pretty much what you think you want, you would still want to get some other readers to read it. Not even just for proofreading, but what do you think about this? Is it clear? Do you understand? And then you would want to go beyond family members and people who know you. So then, if you talk to people you don't know, such as maybe your professors, or even somebody here at the Writing, Reading, Speech Assistance area, they will be able to ask questions about, wait, is this referencing something that I wasn't quite getting? They would be able to have that outside experience for you. Proofread again. You can never proofread too many times. And make sure your tone is appropriate. And what do you think this means? What kind of tone do you think your essay should have?
Should it be formal, like you shouldn't use contractions?
That's amazing, yes. So formal is a good way of putting it. And part of formality is, not every student knows this, contractions. So instead of saying don't, you would want to say do not. That sort of thing. It just has that extra air of professionality to it. Also, not using emojis or slang or anything like that. So you want to be enthusiastic, but calm. So maybe not 50 exclamation points, but still saying, I am passionate about this and I'm excited to have the chance to go to this school. That's totally fine. Show it in your words and not in your punctuation so much, though. And then a really important thing is to go back to the prompt and look at what you had underlined or highlighted or identified as the things that the prompt is asking you to do to make sure that you have done that. Make sure you have answered all the questions that were asked of you. Make sure you haven't forgotten anything. Okay, so with all of that in mind and with some writing right in front of you and with some ideas of where to move forward, where are you at now? And what do you know that you still need to do? What still worries you about your writing? Take a moment to jot down anything that's like your next steps. Where will you go from here? Or concerns that you still have about your essay. Okay, so where can you go to get those questions answered or your concerns addressed? One of the main places, of course, that I'm going to recommend is the Writing, Reading, and Speech Assistance area. We are all trained to work with transfer essays. In fact, most of them have written them at some point in our lives successfully since we've gotten, our degrees and everything. So you can always come to us for help with anything writing related. We work with students one-on-one on transfer essays, transfer scholarship essays as well for when you do get accepted, and then you can even write some more essays for some extra money, and any kind of college writing. We can meet with you in person, online, you can even submit this writing asynchronously and we would get you some feedback on it later, all sorts of ways that you can get help from us. So this is our scheduling website. You can also see Learning Commons videos on there, and we even have a video on transfer essays in case you wanted a refresher on this. You lose your handout or something, and it's midnight and the coach isn't available. There's also that, because we want to help you as much as possible. This is what our scheduling, so this is our main website. This is our scheduling website. And then here are our hours. I have some transfer essay little business cards with information on them. There you go.
Thank you.
Yep. Just to remind you that we're here to help you with those. any stage of the process, from brainstorming to revising and being that second set of eyes before we send you on your way. So thank you for participating in today's workshop, and I wish you all the best in your transfer adventures. Hope to see you around.